I've been struggling to make videos lately. I've written some things and I've sat down in front of the camera a couple of times. And then when I would turn the camera on, I would find that I just didn't have anything to say. This isn't going to be a video where I just complain about being a YouTuber, because as I started thinking about why I was struggling to say things on camera, I started reading and thinking more about the internet and what it does to us. And I don't really have a script for this video, but I thought I would try and share some of those thoughts with you. So I was reading this book by Byung-Chul Han called Non-Things, which is really Han's book about the internet. You might know about Han because of like the Burnout Society, or I particularly like Vida Contemplativa, but Non-Things was actually probably one of the most relevant books that he's written. You know, he publishes a book every year or something, and yet this was the book that I read it and thought, like, damn, I needed to hear this. Han is trying to make sense of the difference between a world in which we primarily interact with things, and things he just means like objects out in the world, tables and chairs and things, versus non-things, which is really information. And when we're interacting with things on the internet, we're really interacting with non-things. And Han says that we can be described as infomaniacs, that we are people who have become addicted to information. You know, at one point in the video, he talks about holding a smartphone, and he talks about scrolling on his smartphone like this. He says that when you're looking at your phone, it gives you this illusion that the world is totally available to you. He calls it a digital illusion of total availability. So you can access absolutely anything in the world on your phone or on a screen, whatever screen you're using right now, and it can make it seem like everything is just a click away. Okay, that seems like a pretty good point. It might be one of the explanations for why people find the internet so addictive. When you're walking around your house or going about your normal day, not everything is available to you. In fact, only some things are. You're limited by like where you are or what you can reach, what you can afford. And, you know, there's all these restrictions and limitations on your day-to-day life. But when you're on the internet, it can feel like everything is so close and so available, and you can have anything that you want. But Han also describes the condition that we end up in if we give in to this illusion of total digital availability, and he describes that as infomania. You know, so if you're an infomaniac, you are someone who is addicted to information. Han is really fond of using like psychological descriptions or like psychologizing all of our issues. I don't mean it to sound like any kind of like clinical diagnosis. I'm not trying to be a therapist for anyone, myself included. But I think that he is kind of onto something, because being online sort of, I don't know how to say this. Being online kind of leads to this hunger inside of you, where you're always hungry for more, and you get some information, and then you think you're satisfied, you think your appetite has been sated, but very, very quickly, the hunger returns. I was reading another book, actually, about this subject, You and Your Profile by Hans-Jörg Moeller and Justin D'Ambrosio, and they cite the scholar Nicholas Luhmann. And Luhmann thought that one of the characteristic features of information was that information was only usable once. So you look at a piece of information, and then it becomes non-information. I don't know if Han was influenced by Luhmann. I don't know if he's read them. I don't think I saw that in his notes anywhere in Non-Things. But it's a really interesting parallel, because what Luhmann is kind of describing is you get a piece of information, you consume it, and then you discard it. And if you ever want more information to kind of satisfy that hunger that Han is describing, you would just go and get brand new information. You can't return to the same information twice. And so this is, okay, I feel like I'm kind of rambling here. why I think that's important is that if you start making videos online, or you start doing anything online, you always feel like you have to have something to say. And you always need something new and fresh and exciting to say, because you're responding to this fact that people want new and fresh and exciting things. There's that hunger. And part of your job when you're online is to satisfy that hunger. It's to feed them and feed people. It's kind of put me in a weird position. Some of my favorite videos that I've ever made are about how the attention economy does us wrong. How if you're giving your attention away, you are giving it away to corporate advertisers or to bad actors or just to people who don't have your best interest in mind. That's kind of like the summary of much of the work that I've created. And you shouldn't think of your attention as a kind of resource which is going to be extracted for monetary gain for someone else, but rather to think about attention as a way of showing care and love to the people around you and to the world around you. And so you choosing where to direct your attention is, I think, one of the best ways you can show that you love and care. But the game that I'm playing online is to grab your attention. It's to keep you hooked. If you look up any of the common advice that you'll see about being a YouTuber or just being on the internet or anything like this, it's about hooks and engagement and about ways to keep people's attention from waning. Even right now, I'm wondering, if I just talk like this on camera for a little while, are people going to listen or are they going to click away? And what I'm deciding right now in this moment is to say, I don't really care if you click away. I'm just going to talk about something that's sort of on my mind. I guess you could say that the problem that I'm facing is this problem where I want to talk to people. I want to reach people. I like what I do. But at the same time, I feel like by playing the internet's game, I'm always kind of bound to lose. This theme of, playing somebody else's game is actually a central part of another book that I read. And I guess this is a video where I just tell you some interesting things that I learned from some books. That book was The Score by Thi Nguyen. The subtitle of that book is How to Stop Playing Somebody Else's Game. So Thi Nguyen is one of the most interesting philosophers I've ever had the pleasure of talking to. I actually did an interview with Thi Nguyen for my podcast. If you want to find that, I guess I'll link it down below so you can watch it. He's such an interesting guy because he is using his real philosophical prowess to try and make sense of the internet and this kind of digital culture that we live in, but he's going about it in a really interesting way. And it's so interesting because Nguyen's great passion in life, it seems, is games. He is obsessed with games. There's this New York Times profile of him that they ran instead of doing a traditional book review. And it talks about him going rock climbing and him going fly fishing and playing board games and playing card games, and even shows him doing some yo-yo tricks. And Nguyen's thesis in The Score is basically that because of the presence of things like metrics and analytics on the internet, we live in a sort of gamified culture, and which I'll just note that he doesn't like the word gamification. So I apologize, T. But we live in this kind of gamified culture where what we find is that we start playing games that we don't even really want to be playing. And he says that these metrics and these games that we end up playing suck the joy and meaning out of life. So one of the primary concepts in The Score is this idea of value capture. And value capture has 3 steps. So in the first step, your values start off as rich and subtle. They could also just be developing that way. In the second step, you enter some social setting that offers you a simplified or often quantified rendition of your values. And then in the third step, the simplified values just take over. So here's an example that I'm sure any of you can relate to. When you post something on social media, the first thing you might be thinking is just, I want to say something interesting, or I want to post a pretty picture, or I want to show the world the cool meal or the delicious meal that I just ate. But if you post it on, like, let's just say Instagram, Instagram has a scoring system to it. They don't call it a scoring system, but it's there, right? And it's the number of likes that you receive, or shares, or comments. And that lets you know, right, if you made a good post. I'll put good post here in scare quotes to know that I'm a little bit skeptical of that measure of quality. You started off with this value of just like posting a pretty picture, posting something that you thought was beautiful and sharing it with the world. And that's like a rich and subtle value. It's qualitative, so sometimes it's very difficult to express. It can also be context dependent, and your values with each of your individual posts might be different. But then the metrics that come in, like the likes, the shares, the comments, those are the simplified version of those values. And they give you a sort of objective, again, kind of in scare quotes here, way of measuring if what you are talking about or sharing or whatever is worth it. And over time, you stop caring about those rich and subtle values that you started with, and you start only valuing the simplified ones. This isn't like a moral failing on anybody's part, I think. I mean, surely there are some people who are aware of this fact and just decide not to care, and they just want to make stuff that goes super viral or that millions of people like. But for many people, you don't even notice that it's happening. It's so easy to measure quality when you have these metrics that it's just easier for you to think in those terms than it is to think in terms of your rich and subtle values. And I think to some extent this happened to me. I started this YouTube channel because I wanted to talk to people about books and ideas. That was the whole point. I had no aspirations when I started my YouTube channel. My guiding principle throughout most of my time on YouTube has been that if it's something that I'm interested enough to make a video about, then it's worth making. That's the way I'd like to think about it. And I think that many times I've done this. The video I'm most proud of ever is my video on Plato's Republic. But if you ask me why I liked it, it wouldn't be because of the number of views it got. It would be because I was actually really proud of the work and the content, and I thought it was something important. At the time, I didn't think that there was any long video on Plato's Republic out there that was actually worthwhile for students or for people who might want to read it on their own. And so I made it, and I'm incredibly proud of it. But it's not like I have never gotten trapped in thinking about metrics and success. Especially when I went full-time. I became a full-time YouTuber about 2 years ago. I had lost my job in tech. There's a video, looks kind of embarrassing in retrospect, but I put a video out that talked about getting laid off from a tech company and deciding that I was going to give it a shot to be a full-time YouTuber since I already had a channel that was growing and I thought I could work. Just as a note, when I lost my job, we had enough money to live on for a couple of months. And I asked my wife, would you give me 3 months to see if it can work? And if not, I'll go find another job. And she unhesitatingly said, yeah, you should try it. You should do it. She might be clinically insane, but I've always appreciated that fact. And in the time since I went full time, I made videos that I was more proud of than even before. So I would say that I, for the most part, have been really happy with what I've done. But in the back of my head, especially once I went full time, I was thinking about numbers all the time. I was thinking about analytics. I was thinking about metrics. Some amount of that is just necessary for running a sustainable YouTube channel. Some of that is just because you're going to notice if people watch or people don't watch, right? But that's how value capture works. When I was reading Nguyen's book, that's what kind of drove it home for me. Was value capture isn't something that you ever decide. I'm no longer going to care about quality. I'm just going to care about metrics. Instead, it's just that the simplified values, because they're so easy and they're so accessible, they just take over without you noticing. So I guess if I'm trying to tie together all the themes in this video, because I would say that we live in this world that demands more information all the time. That's the point from Han. That's the infomania. If Luhmann's right, it means that we also need new information. You can't just post about the same stuff over and over, right? and novelty and coming up with a new spin on everything is the demand. And then you put all of that in conjunction with operating in such a quantified technological ecosystem, and what you find at the end of the day is that you're no longer caring about the things that you want to make. You find that you care about making stuff and then seeing if the numbers go up. I guess what I mean by that is that I had, without realizing it, started to play the internet's game, even while I said that I was critiquing the internet. And I think that while I was engaging in that project, which I think is a worthwhile project and something that I want to, continue doing, what I lost sight of actually was these rich and subtle values that I started with. So there's no incredibly satisfying resolution to this video. It's probably terribly boring, and if I'm right about everything I've said about the internet, then nobody's going to watch it. But I guess what I'm saying is it can happen to all of us, right? It can happen to me. I think it has happened to me. It might be happening to you too. And that's why I think those books that I mentioned are so worth reading. But there's one other thing I wanted to talk to all of you about. Something that I announced in a community post a month ago or so, a few weeks ago at least, but that I want to tell everybody on camera. I have decided that I am no longer taking sponsorships. So by sponsorships, I mean those 60-second ads that you'll see in the middle of a video. Usually in my videos, it's at the end of the video, where the person on camera tells you about some product and says that you should give them your money. I took sponsorships early on in this channel because it helped pay my bills, right? Sponsorship actually, especially when I first went full time, actually made the project sustainable. And I never liked doing it, right? But I always kind of made my peace with it. But I realized that if I'm doing this project, right, this channel, and I'm trying to get you to listen to me ever, what I am really doing kind of fundamentally is asking you to trust me. I am asking you to click on something when I post because you trust that I will have something interesting or worthwhile to say. I usually do that by doing research for my videos, or making sure that even if you hated everything that I said, you could look at my bibliography or the books that I mentioned and go find something worth reading. And then what does a sponsorship do though? A sponsorship basically says, a company comes in and says, hey, you've built up this trust with your audience. Now we want you to use that trust to sell our product, and we'll pay you money for that. And the conclusion that was really uncomfortable for me from a business perspective, but I found I couldn't get around it, was what they were doing was asking me to sell your trust every time I took a sponsorship. So I've decided to stop doing that. Now, I wrote a post about this on my newsletter, and I did mention that on occasion I might still get a sponsorship from Nebula. I'm on Nebula. I like Nebula. I like what Nebula stands for. It's an independent streaming service. They are not sponsoring this video. And they do a lot to support the creators that are on the platform. I also think that the fact that you could subscribe for a fairly small amount of money, but then go watch a lot of really great videos without any ads is actually worth it. That one might actually be worth your time. They will not be sponsoring every video, but I might occasionally do that, right? They're kind of the exception, I think, that proves the rule, though, because I would make an exception to them because I'm already a part of the organization. I like the stuff that's on there. I don't think they are exploiting you or stealing your data or something. And I think that if you like what you see on YouTube, you would like that. It's an easy thing to make sense of. But if you watch one of my videos about the attention economy and then I say, hey, by the way, buy a VPN, or hey, here's a meal kit you can buy or something. What am I doing? Just what am I doing? So I decided that I'm not going to do it anymore. I talked that over with my wife too, and she told me to do it. I talk about all of my major decisions with her, and especially because for monetary decisions, business decisions, this affects both of us. And she said, yeah, I don't think it's a good idea for you to take sponsorships. So you should just stop taking them immediately. First, I thought I would like phase them out slowly or something. She said, no, just don't take them. You'll be happier, and we'll find a way to make this work. And then she asked me a question. She's like, what do you do if it turns out you needed the sponsorship money? You know, AdSense, the way that YouTubers make money, is so inconsistent that a lot of people rely on sponsorships to keep their businesses afloat, to keep themselves afloat, really. It's not just like their businesses, it's their lives. And what I said was, like, if I found that I couldn't sustain myself on either AdSense and the money that people choose to give me, and we'll talk about that in just a second, I promise, then I would just have to go find a job. There's nothing wrong with having a job. And I would at least feel like I had a clean conscience when I did it. That's the last point I wanted to make in this video. I'm no longer taking sponsorships. And as a response to that, some people asked me to open a Patreon. I already have a Substack. I have a newsletter. You can subscribe there. There are people who don't like Substack, like they don't like the platform, or they're just not on it, or they just don't want to open up another internet account, and I don't blame them. And so I have a Patreon too now. And if people want to support me on Patreon, that's really great. On the Substack, I run a book club. We're actually going to be reading Thi Nguyen's book in May. You can join. You can actually participate in that book club for free, by the way. You don't have to pay me to participate. And on Patreon, I will do the kind of standard YouTuber thing and give you early access to my videos. I always feel like I'm begging for money if I ever mention that I have a Substack, or I guess now a Patreon too. But I'd rather, mention to you that there's a way to support my work than have to continue to take sponsorships. It feels like a more honest and direct way of trying to keep this project going, rather than just, selling your trust to the highest bidder. I wish I had like a really great ending for this video, but I don't. So I guess I'm going to turn the camera off now, go edit this, and I'll see you soon.